Good boy, Gino. Good boy. Who's a good dog? Looks like you've been digging in there.
Well, hey, what's up, everybody? It's Carpo, and I've officially lost my man cave chill zone. This morning I remodeled it because I needed more room for my garden. So, for the time being, I'm gonna have to make videos in here, maybe a little bit more noisy. My apologies. Hey. So, yeah, it's kind of a mess, but you know, whatever. It's nice to have a spot to chill, but it's not always feasible. I guess I'm kind of trading off, right? I wanted to make this video to talk about stress for a minute. It's one of those things that just kind of goes without saying that stress kills. Stress makes you, you know, when you're in the fight or flight syndrome like society seems to be today, it's easy for us to get carried away with shit. Just start stressing over things we can't change. And I was a stress case growing up. I mean, I didn't realize it until my later years, like 30s, in my 30s. When I hit my 30s, I think it was about 8 years ago, I went to the doctor to get a prescription for something. My hope was to just go get a prescription for Valium, because I knew that Valium made me feel better. And I knew that when I took Valium, I felt normal. And I had done my research on it, and I knew that it was addictive. I knew that, you know, long-term usage could cause possible, you know, lifetime dependency. I mean, there's all kinds of, anything that you take that, put it this way, the better, it seems like the better something makes you feel, the harder it is to break away from it. And I found this is not necessarily true with natural plants and compounds. Like, for example, psychedelics are very intense, but you don't want to keep doing them over and over. Marijuana gives you a very strong feeling, but it's not as physically addictive as one might think. Not physically addictive at all. It's just a mental addiction. But we use various substances to try to ease our stress. And I found that over the years, I've spent about the last 5 years learning to doing stress management techniques for myself. And lo and behold, over the years, I don't stress anymore. I don't worry about the stupid things that I used to worry about. Like if, say, a cop's behind me, and I start thinking, oh, what if I get pulled over? Even when I'm doing nothing wrong, you know. And when I started to really see myself and see the stress and realize, I went to the doctor, I'm looking for a prescription. He gave me a prescription for Klonopin for a while, and I only got it filled once. But then he gave me, I can't remember the name of the other drug. It was called, like, I wanted to say it was like Buspar, something like that. It was one of those ones that supposedly you have to take for a while before it acclimates and builds up into your system. I don't buy those, you know. The placebo effect can be so strong with, say, an antidepressant or an anxiolytic that you have to take for weeks on end before it actually takes effect. That to me says that the drug may or may not work, but the person may or may not just get over it. And if it doesn't work, you go back to the doctor, they give you something different. And the world of prescription medication is ruining people. And the reason why people are prescribing so many medications a lot of the time is because they want to deal with pain and deal with stress and depression. But I think the depression often comes from too much stress and worrying about things that, you know, aren't worth worrying about. And stress makes you stupid. And this is scientific studies that have shown that, you know, when we go into fight or flight mode, when we are stressing, our immune system shuts down. But not only that, the frontal lobe, the front of our brain shuts down, and the back of the brain begins to take over. In other words, we act out of our irrational primal center when we're stressed. And over a period of time, this causes the front of the brain to cease using itself as much, especially if you're chronically stressed, and you begin to act irrationally. And this very point is why I don't argue or debate or get into um, major discussions with people who are fear-based or fear-oriented. Because if their lifestyle is fear-oriented, then they're going to be anxious, you know. If you wake up in the morning and the first thing you think about is whether or not Ebola has spread, or whether or not a new war is breaking out, or you're looking into the latest conspiracy, even that slight, excitement that comes from the fear is a type of anxiety, and it's a type of fight or flight. It clouds your judgment. It clouds who you are. It clouds everything, and that way you can't have really any basis or any validity to what you say, because the things you say are fear-based. It's very difficult to say that without sounding condescending towards people who are, involved in exposing various conspiracies, because I don't mean to be that way. It's there are people who deal with it rationally, and there are people who immerse themselves in it because of the fear factor, because they enjoy that rush of excitement when something's scary. And there are too many different types of people, so I'm obviously not generalizing anybody who believes in any one thing. There are a dozen different reasons people believe in things. Doesn't mean they're any more or less real, but people tend to jump on the bandwagon for this fear-based thinking. And you see one constantly recurring theme is that those people who are like that tend to attack those who are passive or peace-oriented, or say anything related to trying to mend the ways of the world, help the world. Those other people will say, no, there's no helping us, we're screwed. You'll hear terms over and over like humanity is a disease, or we don't belong here, or we need something to wipe out the population, or the population's going to be wiped out anyway from the Bilderbergs and the Illuminati, and they have this planned genocide for the entirety of the world, and yada yada yada. Chemtrails are killing us, the water's killing us, foods, GMOs, bacterias, Ebola, school shootings, everything's an illusion, everything's a hoax. All of these things are wrapped up in a complete waste of time as far as I see it. And I really wish, I hope that doesn't sound, condescending or harsh towards people who are really adamant about trying to expose fraud, because many of the problems in society have to be exposed and have to be dealt with. And I think it's up to, it's like the community doesn't have any consensus on what those important things are. There are people running around screaming that the banks are, run by these people and that people, but nobody's out there just saying, hey, look, the banks are ripping us off straight forward through, interest rates. Like, there's no organized action, because I feel like there's a large segment of people who don't want a solution. They don't want to have an action that they can actually take, or something they can actually do anything about, or organize, or help to change. That it's rather, they just want to complain. And I've been a complainer, so I understand. I know where they're coming from, but it gets nowhere. It gets nowhere. Society is not going to change because we have ideals. Society is going to change because we apply our ideals. Like I just can't say enough times, we just can't push our views on other people. We can't do it through anger, hostility. Religion never succeeded in forcing itself down anybody's throat. People just learned to tolerate it, so they didn't get, This is, I guess, why I've always been so... I'm not necessarily opposed to religion, I'm opposed to theology. I think religion can be a phenomenal thing. But I think theology... Many of these ancient cultures or ancient groups, mystical schools, mystery schools, if you will, hid what they did, not from the people, and this is, I feel like it's the original root of why they did these, why they hid was not, it's obscured. And people think that they're trying to hide some secret magic from the general population. We're talking about those who pass on the lamp, the deep archetypal, old philosophies. The reason why they were hidden is not because of the people, it was because of the church, the organizations, the states, which would burn you at the stake if you, spoke against the church, the state. So everything was encoded. Everything was metaphoric, and it's beautiful. And it doesn't have to be scary, you see? Like, you could see two different ways of looking at something like hell, the idea of hell. You could say, you could be scared of something like hell, and damn, if I was a Christian and I believed that there's a possibility I could burn eternally in a fiery pit, the most ludicrous idea that I could ever imagine, and this isn't just like, oh, it's a dumb idea, it just sounds dumb, it's that I've done tons of research on theology, cultures, comparative religion, mythology, and all these different, archetypes and allegories, and found that hell really has no place in any of it. Hell doesn't even fit into the picture of any of these old mystical teachings or any of it. The idea of purgatory does. The idea that when you die, your soul goes into a place where you have to deal with your shortcomings before you're recycled back into the system, if that's what happens. But we as humans to even speculate and say, oh, I know what happens when I die. I've just moved beyond that. I'm not going to say I'm better or worse than anyone else because of how I'm just saying that I used to wrestle with what actually happened when I die, and now it's become irrelevant to me because I know what matters now, which is the way I live this life. And the only reason I would be concerned with what happens after I die is if I wanted to make sure that I endured as myself, and I'll never know that for sure. Sure, there's ghosts, there's tons of evidence, as people say, I've had, arguments even with my mom, she'll say, there's just tons of evidence to support that there's ghosts and that, there's an afterlife and then reincarnation. I say, yeah, depending on what you consider evidence. And I look at it all and say, well, anything's possible. Because I can't follow one particular path and say, because everyone I've looked at seems to be lacking in one way or another. Every explanation I've received as to how reincarnation works is always lacking in one way or another. Every religious idea is always missing or has something it doesn't need. And I think that a lot of the stress that we have comes from trying to attach to those ideas and try to prove and hold on to them. And so it comes down to people ranting and raving like lunatics. I mean, I have a lot of patience with people. I like people. I'm a people person, or I consider myself a people person. But I have a very short fuse when it comes to, well, not short fuse, that's anger related. Say I just have a low tolerance when it comes to just complete rudeness or ignorance, in the sense when a person is purposely doing something selfishly at the cost of others. I just can't handle that. I think that rudeness and in society is a huge issue, and it causes a lot of stress. And I think about driving. That one guy that's weaving in and out of traffic that thinks he's just better and faster and he needs to get there quicker than everyone else, and he's weaving in and out saying, look at all these dumbasses that are in my way, and all these people are just, he stresses them all out. It's like, everybody's trying to. And so often in society that same metaphor applies. It's that one guy, that one person that just fucks it up for everybody. And so we got to weed those people out, and I think we can only do that through seeing the value of a person's input. What I say may be of no value to you at all, or it may be of total value depending on who you are and what you consider important. But I'm not going to sit here and say what I value you should value. Although in my heart I do believe that many of the values I have, I think that society would be happier if they had. But at the same time, I realize that there's many values I lack that I see in society that I want to gain. In other words, say motivation to do more, things, to help more, to help others more. I see people who want to help, groups that assist others. Things like the Freemasons who, everybody talks shit about, but they contribute so much to their local communities, more than the average person does. So in other words, a person's talking and saying, oh, Freemasons are all a bunch of fucking devil worship and, Illuminati, satanic, whatever. And meanwhile, I know them. I know ones that, they go and they donate to their communities. They help out at the soup kitchen, And I'm thinking, what do you do, the complainers, But I can look at myself and say, what do I do too? And I'm willing to admit that all I'm doing really is, I write, I read, I talk about stuff, I make videos, I try to inspire others to think, but really I realize that that's all just my little view of life, and it's all subjective. But I do try to base it on objective thinking, by looking at what was important to our ancestors, what's important to us now, and not trying to say, hey, we need to get back to the good old days, but not saying, hey, this is the ideal that we have to live in, but saying, this is the fucking world we live in right now, people. This is where we're at. This is what we have, and this is what we're going to work with. So, we could sit and, have all these ideas about how things should change or what things should be, but they're not like that. And it gets old. I think that people stress themselves out, trying to tell themselves how things need to be and how other people should think. And I'm like, who the hell are you to know what anybody else should think? There's 7 billion people on this planet, and if one person, claims to have this truth, let's say they claim that they're Jesus, they claim that they're this reincarnation of this or whatever that is, somebody who's trying to gain believers and followers and start a group and say, hey, I am this person, or I am this. Nobody has anything that they can prove to say that they were a person or they weren't. It's just, here I am, believe it or don't. And people believe it because people want to believe. And so when people use that argument to say, well, I believe this, but look at how long this has endured, look how many people believe in this. This has been an argument, often Christians have presented. They'd say, if there wasn't some truth to it, it wouldn't have lasted this long. And I say, and they wouldn't have this many followers. And I look at other groups like Scientology and Mormonism, and I say, well, they picked up pretty quick too. It's just the way of the world. People want a leader, they want somebody to direct them, and they want to follow. Not all people. And then there are a large group that they all want to be leaders and tell everybody else how it is, and they want to fall into those shoes. I'm happy to be neither a leader or a follower, but an individual. Gotta go.